What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all having an amazing day. Today I've got one crazy entitled parent story for you, so sit back, relax, and let's jump straight into it. My own entitled mother tried to kill me. This is why I'm no longer in contact with her. I've posted a few stories about things my entitled mother has done and why I no longer speak to her, and I've had some people say I should give her a second chance. Here's a list of the reasons why that will never happen. It's in sections so it's easier for us to read. Firstly, played favourites and destroyed my belongings at age 6. I first noticed my mother playing favourites, my younger sister who's 3 years younger than me, when I was 6 years old, Christmas of 1996. My sister got all the big presents and I got a few cheap bracelets and an ornament. My dad bought us rollerblades for Christmas that year, and the next day we were outside trying them out. My sister, who was 3 at the time, fell over and hit her head and began crying. My mother came out of the house and began screaming at me, assuming I pushed her, which I didn't. She was having none of it though, and sent me to my room. A few minutes later, she came into my room in a rage and smashed all of my belongings, including my Christmas presents. Half an hour later, she came in and said, her words exactly, "Your room's a freaking pigsty, clean it up now." When I asked her about it the next day, she claimed to not know what I was talking about. The second thing she did was freak out when I got my period for the first time. If you've seen the movie Carrie, you will understand what happened. Now, my mother isn't as psychotic as Carrie's mum, and she's not religious, but she went really weird. She started asking if I'd had sex, how heavy it was, if I knew what it meant, but she wouldn't tell me, if I was ashamed of myself, and a lot of other weird questions. And every time I'd ask her to buy me pads, she never would. She'd just throw money at me and say she didn't want to know. And there were occasions when I had to ask my friend's mum for pads, because my mum had no money or wouldn't spend her child support money on me because I'm not worth it. But again, if my sister wanted anything, she'd get it for her immediately. Thirdly, she wouldn't call an ambulance when I fell off a horse, but called one when the same thing happened to my sister. I was about 13 when this happened. My mother and my sister were really into riding horses, but I never was. But I was so desperate for my mum's approval that I started going to pony club with them. One day, my horse got spooked by something and bucked me off. He was a really big horse. I almost landed on top of a barbed wire fence and was knocked out for a few minutes. I woke to my mother screaming at me, saying, "What the freaking heck do you think you're doing, you stupid bleep?" She didn't even help me up. A few months later, the same thing happened to my sister, but this time my mother freaked out. She came into the house screaming at me to get off my useless lazy butt and help my sister while mum called an ambulance. My sister wasn't hurt, she'd fallen off a small horse onto a pile of dirt, but she was milking the attention for everything it was worth. She was taken to the hospital and didn't go to school for the rest of the week. Now for the fourth reason OP no longer speaks to her mother. She took down my door because it made a noise when I closed it. When I was 12, I lost the privilege of having a bedroom door. The latch wouldn't click shut unless you gave it a harder push, and it would swing open if it wasn't click shut. But my mum refused to fix it. One day when I was closing the door so I could change clothes, it made a little too much noise for my mother's liking. She burst into my door, screaming at me to shut the door up. Then she took out the hinges and took it away. From 12 until 14, I had no bedroom door and no privacy to change my clothes or sleep with the door closed. That is mental. Now for the fifth reason. My sister and her friend broke into the school, but it was somehow my fault. This happened when I was 13. It was during school holidays, and my sister and her BFF broke into the school and wrote out merit awards to each other, which was obviously a stupid idea and is how they were caught. After this happened, I got the feeling that my mum was angry at me for what they'd done. This was confirmed many years later. The next story is a continuation of this. Number 6 now, admitted to my friend's mum how much she hated me. I always knew that my mum didn't like me, but the most I was ever told was that I was an accident and that she regretted having me. But I heard from my best friend's mum a few years ago exactly what my mum thought of me. My friend was over for a sleepover one weekend and my mum was talking to my friend's mum. These are some of the things my mum said. "I just can't believe believe that OP's sister would do something like that. It's more of what OP would do. I'd never done anything that would give her that idea. Also, I don't know why anyone would be friends with OP. If I were in school, I wouldn't be friends with her. Alright, I think we're on number 7 now. Destroyed my belongings because she couldn't find the broom. This happened one summer weekend day when I was 13. My mum burst into my room and demanded to know where the broom was, through the door that wasn't there, I presume. I said I didn't know and I hadn't been outside all day. She accused me of hiding the broom and began throwing my belongings at me. In fear of my life, I ran out of the house and ran to the police station at the other end of town. This was in 2003 and I didn't own a mobile phone. When we got back to the house and the police asked her what happened, she put on her sweet and innocent face and said, "I don't know what she's talking about. She must be on her period or something." The policeman believed her and wouldn't hear my side of the story and left. Number 8. Her verbal abuse turned physical. Her abuse was mostly verbal and throwing things at me until I was 14. She started getting into these fits of rage over nothing. Couldn't find the remote? A slap in the face. Got angry over nothing? Pushed me into a wall and throwed me and my sister out of the house. Couldn't find something to watch on TV? Punched me in the face, pushed me on the ground and kicked me in the back. Her horse didn't win at the show, my fault. Her car won't start, my fault. Run out of money, my fault. And the list goes on. She did this until I was 15 when I'd had enough. I warned her, take one step further and you'll regret it. Needless to say, she regretted it. The glass jar smashed to the side of her face gave her the message. She never touched me again after that and I moved in with my dad. Oh yeah, good for you. Number 9. Physically abuse my autistic brother. I won't go into much detail with this one, but I found out a few years ago that my mother used to rip chunks of hair out of his head and many other atrocious things. Oh my goodness, and guys, it doesn't stop there. Number 10. Wanted to turn off the life support when I was in a coma. This is the title right here. When I was 17, New Year's Eve 2007, I suffered a spinal cord injury and brain injury after falling off a roof. I was placed under an induced coma. My dad was with me the whole time, but it took my mum 3 weeks to come, even though her partner at the time could have paid to get her there sooner. All she knew was that I'd had an accident and was in a coma. She came with things to bury me with. My parents were given the option to turn the life support off. My dad said no, having faith that I'd pull through. But my mum said yes and threw a tantrum when she didn't get her wish. So instead of burying me with what she brought, they were placed on my bed while I was in a coma. Rehabilitation was hard and traumatic, so I don't like talking about it, so I'll skip ahead to the next thing. Well, I'm glad you recovered. Now, are we on to number 11? I literally can't even keep track. Threw a tantrum after my dad told me. While I was in rehab after my injury, my dad let it slip that my mum wanted to turn the life support off on me. Up until this point, I didn't know this. I called my mum and told her I never want to see her again, and that if I'm dead to her, then she's dead to me. And finally, number 12, tried to steal money from her kids after our dad dies. In 2009, my dad and my uncle, his brother, died in a plane crash. I was 19, my sister 16, and my brother 22. My mother was there for the next day to offer her support, but nobody wanted her there. My entire family now despises her. She started asking questions about the will and his assets, of course. That's information we didn't give her. We didn't know the cause of death for 3 weeks after his death, and lo and behold, she got nothing. The will was written before my parents had even met. The will gave everything to my dad's siblings, and they gave it all to me and my siblings, so long as we promised that our mother got nothing. She's tried a few times in the past few years to get money from us, but we won't talk to her. And that is that. I haven't spoken to my mother in about 7 years, and I don't ever plan on seeing her again. She's a toxic person, and life is better without her. My brother still talks to her from time to time, but me, my sister, and the rest of the family want nothing to do with her. And also, me and my sister are really close. She's not entitled, and I hold no resentment towards her. I actually love her to bits. Thanks for reading. Wow, the more and more that story got on, the worse and worse the abuse got. I mean, don't take anything away from the first few points. That was mental abuse, and yeah, favoring one child over the other, that's not the done thing, that is abuse. But then, yeah, as I say, the more and more it went on, when it becomes physical, when it becomes, talking about your life support, potentially turning that off when you're in a coma, even when your dad doesn't want to. That is just absolutely crazy. That's got to be some of the worst stuff that I've ever read on this subreddit, I've got to say that. Guys, let me know if I'm wrong, but I counted 12 separate points, all completely valid of course, as to why OP would not want to speak to her mother again. All I can say, OP, is yeah, obviously you've made the right decision. Don't listen to anyone that tells you otherwise. Your mother, of course, and anyone in your family perhaps that also says, you know what, it might be worth getting back in contact. No, clearly it's not. These 12 points prove that. Look, overall, there's not much more for me to say. Just a horrible person, and I really hope that she hasn't had too much of a negative impact on your life and your future. If you can get through or get over what you've gone through in the last 18, 20 years, oh, I don't know if you can, but hopefully you can and live some sort of good, positive life. But at this point, I don't even know if that's possible for you, although I really hope it is. Wow, anyway guys, that is going to do it for this episode of Entitled Parents. A pretty crazy story. I can't quite believe it, the stuff that you've been through, OP, but as I say, I hope you get through it and hope you live a wholesome life. If you want more from me immediately, perhaps something a little bit more lighthearted, check out yesterday's video where there were a couple of fun stories. Not really like this one, a bit more lighthearted in that one for sure. If not, just make sure you are subscribed to the channel with notifications on so you never miss one of my daily uploads. And with that being said, I will see you guys same time, same place for another video on the channel.